day one of our Israel journey and was very excited to see Frankfurt, Germany.
Stay here long. We were only here one night, so the next morning we kind of had to pack our stuff up, but all of McKinnon's luggage got wet getting off the plane, so he had to lay all his stuff out.
Mm-hmm. Then first site to visit was Caesarea Maritima.
This was King Herod's port city, major port city, where he would trade with Rome. He would give Rome goods, they would give him goods. This is also which Herod?
King Agrippa the First.
Right here in this amphitheater. He sat basically where I'm standing right here, and was eaten by worms from the inside out. So this was kind of the site of his death as well. It was also pouring rain.
Oh yeah, it was nasty.
And neither of us had the rain gear that we were supposed to bring, so we kind of had to make do.
First of many views that we would see on this trip.
Yeah, this is the Mediterranean here. Again, where the Roman ships would come in and Herod's ships would go out.
Mm-hmm. Also where Paul visited many times, sailed in and out of, and also where Peter converted the centurion.
And what you're looking at now is the remnants of Herod's castle there on the coast, and you could see the pool, some of the mosaics, and the hippodrome, where they used to race chariots. We also saw this rock, which had Pontius Pilates written on it, which is kind of the first external mention of Pontius Pilate outside the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Now this is Mount Carmel. This is where Elijah killed the prophets of Baal, and also where the final sight of Armageddon will take place.
Yeah, so when you look over into the valley, that's the valley of Jezreel, and this is where all of the kings from the different directions will meet for the Battle of Armageddon.
Mac seemed to think it would be Russia and Syria and China and all these different countries converging in this battlefield here at the end of times. Oh, and also the Israeli Air Force has a landing strip there that they shoot off their F-35 Raptors and stuff, so they're pretty convinced that's where it's going to take place. Cats were everywhere. They built churches over all these important places too, which I found interesting.
Yeah, like Hawaii has chicken, Israel has cats. There are cats literally everywhere.
And this was our first lunch. Everybody was a little nervous to see what the food was going to be like.
What was interesting is that our lunch was located in Druze territory, which is a weird kind of sector of Islam, which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they broke away from like the Muslim faith, and they're persecuted because they do believe in Jesus. Is that right? Or no, it's a secret religion. We don't know what they believe. Now this is Tel Megiddo. This is like one of the oldest sites. And also the final battle of Armageddon. This city will be destroyed, it says, in the final battle.
Now we got to walk down and see kind of their ancient water tunnels, which was really interesting, all underground.
Mm-hmm. And this was
a lovely video that my husband took of me sleeping. One of the many videos so that he took of me sleeping on the bus.
The jet lag on day one was kind of tough, wasn't it?
I think this is Nazareth.
Mm-hmm. We're entering Nazareth, which was the first Palestinian-controlled territory that we visited.
Yeah, we hiked up on this mountain and you could look down in the valley and see the entirety of the city of Nazareth. We didn't actually go into Nazareth. We kind of drove through it, but from my understanding, it wasn't super safe, so I don't think we spent a lot of time in Nazareth. And that's the Valley of Jezreel just from the other side. So Mount Carmel kind of is on one side, Nazareth is on the other. So Magdala was kind of one of the most recently discovered cities here on the Sea of Galilee, and it's kind of a big deal because they found this stone that they believe the Torah was on in the middle of one of the earliest synagogues, and it is believed that Jesus more than likely preached in this synagogue just because of its location being on the Sea of Galilee, which is kind of where his ministry was concentrated. But also too, they just know that the setup of the stone being in the center and all of the pillars on the outside most likely represented the early synagogue. I thought the mosaics were really cool. Those were original, and we saw those in a lot of ancient Jewish and ancient Roman structures, along with the frescoes as well. We saw some baths that had those frescoes. Also up on the hill, they had a lot of caves, which it was known that in one of the Jewish rebellions, the Jews ran up into the caves and the Romans kind of went in there and hunted them out.
This was night 2 at our second hotel on the Sea of Galilee.
In Tiberias.
In a very Orthodox Jewish area, one of the most conservative Jewish denominations.
We got out and walked around, specifically on the night before our honeymoon, or before our anniversary or after our anniversary. Saw some cool markets, and this is actually the morning of our anniversary, me and my adventure hat.
And this was Tel Dan. This is one of the oldest archaeological sites ever discovered, dating back to 4000 BC. And this is where they recently found what was it called? The stela, Tel Dan stela, with inscriptions making references to the House of David, which before
King David,
before this discovery, they had never found any historical record of the House of David other than in Scripture. So this was a huge find.
You also saw kind of like a metal box that was one of an early altars. This is where the Israelite tribe of Dan ran and kind of hunkered down. You also have this old city gate as well, which they call the Abraham Gate, because they do believe that Abraham entered into Dan many times through this gate. And you can kind of see the render of what that gate would have looked like as well. But it is known that there was the altar, and then above the altar they actually had a metal calf of Baal, which was just one of the blasphemous things that they did as well.
Seeing something like that gate from 4000 BC is probably one of the oldest thing you and I'll ever see together in life.
So now we've kind of moved on to, this is Caesarea Philippi. This is where Jesus took his disciples and he asked Peter, "Who am I?" Or "Who do you say that I am?" This would have been kind of monumental in the Bible because this is where they sacrificed a lot to the god Pan, which you'll see that grotto right there is where they would actually throw goats, and if the goat floated, then it wasn't a good sacrifice, and so they actually would sacrifice children up here as well. You can see kind of carves into the rock where they had statues to Pan, statues to Zeus, which is totally odd. They had a thing with lambs or sheep, so you have like goat temples and stuff like that up there as well. But this is just kind of a monumental site in the scripture where he, asks them, among all of these idols, among all these other gods, who do you say that I am?
And he also says, this is on Peter, I'll build my church upon this rock, which it gave perspective seeing the huge rock mountain temple there. It makes sense why he would have said that.
I believe this is the Golan Heights, where I almost lost my cookies. I was so sick driving around the Golan Heights. It was so weaving back and forth, lots of, topsy-turvy roads.
Oh yeah, we had our St. Peter's fish lunch here. And the owner of the restaurant decided she wanted to sing for everybody and thank America for coming to visit and thank America for their support to Israel.
Let us pray. Jesus, now we are standing in His presence. Join me. We are standing in His presence. Again. We are standing in His presence on holy, everybody, God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your meal and have a fabulous time in Israel. Thank you so much.
The bread was amazing. It was so good. Oh, man.
Oh, you know what I noticed, which is why I took video of this, is, our minority here in America is a little different. Their minority seems to be the Asian culture. I don't know if that's accurate, but everybody working behind the scenes was Asian in most places.
And our fish was a full fish. It stared at me the whole time.
Now, we're at the Mount of Beatitudes here. This is a pretty special place, and this is where they believe Jesus, delivered the Beatitudes to his disciples, and they built a church.
Against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
You can see the Sea of Galilee kind of down below the Mount of Beatitudes.
All right, and here we're going into Tabgha, which is a couple of sites. This is just one site we visited and got in trouble for not having the shoulders covered.
Oh, they told us we had to have our knees covered, but nobody said anything about the shoulders. The monk got on to me here. This is also where McKinnon got pooped on twice by a bird, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
But this is the site where after Jesus' resurrection, he appeared to Peter and told Peter that he forgave him. See, the bird poop. And also kind of gave him, that you're going to be my fisher of men. You're going to be, the rock of the church, which they have that rock actually sectioned out and have built a church on it. But what we really found interesting was just being able to kind of wade into the Sea of Galilee here, where the sea actually meets the shore. There's not a lot of places that we went where you can actually look and stick your feet into the sea. So this is also where we collected rocks for some of our family members as well. So then we went to Capernaum, which I think was probably one of my favorites. It's also located on the Sea of Galilee, but this is really where Jesus' ministry was centralized. They have this huge building, this huge church that's built over what they believe to be was the house of Peter. This is where Jesus would have slept while he was preaching in the temple, which you can see there. And also, they know it was Peter's house because Peter actually carved his name into the sides of his house. So the temple that you're seeing that McKinnon is walking through is actually a later temple that was built by the Romans, but you can actually see the remnants of what they call Jesus's temple when you look at it from the side. The darker rock is kind of that basalt rock, that volcanic rock. Look at my geologist coming out, where they actually built Jesus's temple, but then on top of that, they would have built the Roman temple that you see the remnants of today. And of course, there's the Sea of Galilee in the background. So Jesus would have preached in that temple and then walked through the city over to St. Peter's house, where he would have lived.
Yeah, this was kind of neat. You can look down through the floor, see through glass, and see Peter's room and the different living quarters that they had.
And that garbage that you see in Peter's house is actually people's prayers that they dropped down before they actually built a structure on top of it.
What stuck out to me, one extra note, is that how close the house was to the synagogue. Because in the Bible it says he would preach all day and then he would walk right home, but you don't realize how close they were. It's pretty neat to me. Oh yeah, our Sea of Galilee boat ride. Now this was interesting. First of all, it was beautiful.
Oh yeah.
I think maybe my expectations were a little too high.
Yeah, well, they did play the American national anthem and raise the flag, which I thought was going to be followed by I'm proud to be an American, but I'm very glad to report that it was not. They actually did play some music, but the people were all up for the national anthem. But it was absolutely beautiful. I was very surprised at how large it was. I was expecting it to be more of like a pond or a lake, but this was truly a massive sea. But it was kind of cool getting to see all of the older, kind of replicas of Jesus's boats, because it gave you a good perspective of what it would have looked like back then.
Ann and I put in some earbuds to try to listen to some worship music, since it was a little not as reverent as we would have liked.
Now, that night it was our anniversary, so of course we did what every sane person would do. We actually went out and found a kosher McDonald's, which was not as good as we wanted it to be, but that was a really cool thing.
Yeah, and now we're off to Jordan. This was pretty interesting. You could feel a shift in energy going to the border at Jordan. Just kind of a oppressive feel. Very friendly people, but very restricted and secure. Yeah. And all the dress and food changed dramatically. The culture of the city changed dramatically.
You could tell a major downshift in wealth, for sure. Which our guide did tell us that Jordan, struggles because of a lot of the restrictions that they've been put under. He said that they actually do have oil under Jordan, but the Saudis won't let them mine the oil, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
I would say that I really enjoyed Jordan. I think this was probably one of my favorite days. Up until this point. We stopped at this really cool restaurant where they were making bread outside, which was phenomenal. Never had such good bread in my whole life that I did over there.
Mm-hmm. And then on the way to our hotel, we stopped at Jerash.
Yeah.
And there were these first markets that we went through, which was fun for me because I was looking forward to seeing all the local stuff. But they're very, very friendly towards everybody that walks through.
A little too friendly, as we found out.
Jerash's significance is that it is the oldest and most well-preserved ruins of Greek and Roman architecture outside of Rome. So it is the second most preserved site of those archaeological finds in the world. Yeah, we met a local vendor that was walking us through the different types of headdresses and what they mean.
Arabia Saudi, not here. Here, Jordan.
Very similar to Caesarea Maritima, it had a hippodrome, which is where they would have kind of raced their chariots and had their games. But again, you can really see the Roman and the Greek architecture, specifically the columns and just how it's set up. It reminded me a lot of the Vatican, where the Vatican has kind of like that ring of columns. It was very similar to that. And this site is huge. We really only got to go around about a third of it, but it's massive. And they had some bagpipe players as well, which was also very interesting. So on our way down to the Dead Sea, we drove through the city of Amman, which is Jordan's largest city. It's also their capital as well. So you saw lots of flags and pictures of their officials. I was also surprised that Jordan is basically all mountains. So the Dead Sea is really the only kind of flat plain that you see in Jordan. Everything else is up and down and up and down and up and down. Lots of ear popping. But we did stay at this amazing resort. This, what was it, the Crown Plaza? It deserved a crown. It was incredible. It was truly something, and it's right there on the Dead Sea. And you can actually see the Dead Sea is shrinking, so you can see the shoreline is actually going lower, and that's because the Israeli has dammed up the Jordan River, so it's not getting the water flow that it used to.
We were pretty excited to see if we would float and put the mud on and get the Fountain of Youth minerals from the mud. And this was probably one of the best days of the trip, I think.
This was really cool.
Oh, everything changed in Jordan. You know, the culture, a focus on family, and of course the sea. It was a little bit slower paced today too, so we were able to enjoy things more here.
And we got to float together, and everybody was putting the mud all over themselves, and just to see people's reactions when they actually got in the water, it was really interesting. I wasn't expecting the floating to actually feel or look like that, so that was really cool. And then we got probably one of our most beautiful sunsets of the whole trip, which was really something, just to get to stand there and watch the sunset. You can see my bag of rocks. We also got some rocks from the Dead Sea too.
Pretty surreal moment to be floating there thinking about Jesus and the Sea of Galilee next to you, and you're about to go to Jordan and you're in this resort, and it's our 1 year anniversary. It was pretty neat. As you can see, the hotel was very nice.
Yeah, it was really nice, and the food was phenomenal. It was like one of the places that actually had some type of Americanized food, so that was a plus for me.
Now, you could not drink the water at all. You couldn't brush your teeth with the water either, so you had to buy bottles of water, use it for everything.
I was showering and got a little bit of it in my mouth, and it did not taste great.
It did taste different, didn't it?
It tasted funny.
Yeah, it tasted weird.
So then we started the next day our 3-hour trek to Petra. Mm-hmm. So again, all mountains here. You can see it's up and down and up and down. So we had to drive about 3 hours to get to the Petra Visitor Center. And then we had about, like a mile walk down to Petra and then a mile walk back up to Petra, which we wanted to take the trolley, which was just golf carts. But the line was too long and we didn't want to be late, so we ended up making the climb back up. But Petra, again, we only saw a third of Petra. It'll take you 7 or 8 hours to actually hike the whole thing. So we actually only hiked down to what they call the treasury, kind of that main view of Petra, which on the way you can see there's lots of other caves and structures and tons of goats and sheep herders, which was really cool because there's lots of mentions to herding sheep and goats in the Bible, and I have never seen that done. So to watch how the sheep are constantly falling off of stuff and jumping out in the road and getting turned around, it was a really cool visual for me, getting to kind of watch that unfold. Yeah,
this site's about the 2nd century BC. and it was the Nabatean travelers. They were nomads that lived at the top of these mountains in tents, and they would come down, and this was their city, and they would trade markets for hundreds of years here. And then it was deserted, and they say went undiscovered again for like 1,800 years.
Yeah, and they also would, this is where they would bury their dead. So they'd live on the mountains, and then they'd come down into the valleys to bury the dead in the tombs.
And the caves you see in the side are tombs, and were they ever repurposed by the future Romans?
Yeah, I think the Romans came through and kind of raided the tombs, cleaned them out, and then used them to live in. And I think the Jews did so as well later.
And Indiana Jones also filmed in this area by the Treasury.
Really cool rock formations, lots of smooth rock. Reminded me a lot of kind of out west in the United States. I did get to ride my camel, which was really cool. Just getting to ride it. He kind of took me around the main treasury area and then took me up to the treasury and took some pictures on our camels. There were lots of people riding camels. It was great. Bucket list item for sure. McKinnon didn't want to ride a camel. I tried to get him on one, but he was not interested.
No, too stinky. That was a cool experience. It truly is one of the 7 wonders of the world. The magnitude, the size of him are just, you have to be there to really feel the size of these mountains. Oh, and this was a sweet little girl that's, what was she doing? Going around
Trying to sell stuff.
and you had a good conversation with her.
Well, she was just trying to learn how to say things in English, so I was showing her.
That was sweet. Oh, and then on the way back to our hotel, we stopped at Mount Nebo. This is where Moses finished his life and where he saw the Promised Land. And that went by quick, but those were the cities of Jericho. You could see Jerusalem. You could see all the places he saw
But he never got to go.
that he never got to go in, and that's where the Lord spoke to him. It was really neat. And then we were off to the Qumran Caves the next morning. This is where they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1900s, the oldest manuscripts of the Old Testament ever found.
Now, a lot of the things at Qumran were actually reconstructions, but we did get to see the Dead Sea Scrolls and some of their bowls and stuff at the Museum of Israel.
Now, Ann asked Pastor Mac about the apocryphal books and why they're not in the canonized version of the Bible, and he explained them.
This collection of 27 books that they knew
please don't
sounded like they all agreed pretty much together. You know,
I saw Book of Enoch written down there. I've heard a lot of people talk about
they are
the Book of
good.
Enoch.
Well, the apocryphal in the Catholic Church, they accept the apocryphal books as being inspired.
Okay.
They are good history books. They give you good history of the time, what's going on. But you read it and you begin to pick up quickly. This doesn't read like the rest of Scripture.
This is pretty neat. This was the living quarters that the sect of Jews would live in. They dined together. It was a very communal place. They shared everything. There was no real economy. And then you could look down into the caves and see where they found the scrolls. There was a series of like 18, wasn't it?
Yeah, there were tons of, and they were found by Bedouin shepherds. The sheep had wandered into a cave. They threw a rock in there to try and kind of scare the sheep back out, but they actually heard it hit something, and then they went in and found the scrolls.
Yeah. And all of it happened in 1947, which to me is just amazing timing following the worst persecution of the Jews and then, of course, the return to the Holy Land.
Now, this was really cool. This is Ein Gedi.
Yep, En Gedi was one of my most anticipated places. This is where David writes that he escaped to and met Saul and yelled out across the valley to Saul and where he also had the opportunity to kill him. And in Psalms, it references the waterfalls here at En Gedi so many different times, and so it was neat being at a site that we know they were and spent time in.
The way where there was a cave and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now back up this way, is in a group of us will go up there. We got to go up there fast, look at it, and then come back fast.
Now then we kind of broke off into two groups. One group actually hiked up into En Gedi and went to David's Waterfall. Obviously, me and McKinnon were in that group. And the other group stayed at the bottom and kind of explored down there. But you actually got to kind of hike through En Gedi and actually go and see where David would have found refuge at David's Waterfall. And it truly was a desert oasis. I mean, you have the Dead Sea, which looks really inviting, but of course is super salty. No one can drink that. But then you get up in there into these mountains and you find David's Waterfall, which is where he would have spent his time riding and kind of hiding out, which of course Saul did come and find him, but they had that exchange here on the mountain where Saul said, "I will stop persecuting you, for surely you are the rightful king," which I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah, that was really special. And then we were off to Masada. This is the place of the Jewish revolt in 70 AD, 30 some years after Jesus was crucified, and this is where the Jews sought refuge after the Romans followed them and chased them up here to Herod, one of Herod's palaces. And they bunkered down here at the top of this mountain and lived there as long as they could. And the Roman army chased them and built a ramp over the course of months up the side of the mountain, and the Jews would watch them. This was an amazing sight, and a lot of history. And then, of course, they decided to commit suicide as the Romans approached the top of the mountain, so that they wouldn't have that victory over them. They would still be in control of their outcome. When you look up off the side of this mountain, you can still see the encampment that the Romans built at the base. And this was a Byzantine church that was built at the top with well-preserved mosaic tile and inscriptions in the rocks from people. But looking down into this valley, you'll see to the right there in that rectangle is the encampment. Of course, you're looking at here where they built the ramp up the side of this gigantic mountain.
Yeah, which I was hoping there would be remnants of that giant ramp that they built, and there is. I mean, you can still see they basically just put a big sand pile to make their way up to get the Jews. So the Jews slowly saw them kind of creeping towards them, and they breached it, and then it was nighttime, so they actually went back down to the Roman camp, and overnight the Jews realized that they were going to be taken, and that's when they decided to commit suicide instead of being imprisoned again.
And I know we just missed it, but there was a huge cistern there, 80 million gallons of water that would be collected, and they could live off that up at the top of the mountain and not have to come down for many months. This is a really well-preserved Roman bath that Herod built at the top of Masada as part of his palace. Everywhere he built, all his palaces had these Roman baths, and for me, it was the first time I'd seen one in that good a shape. That was really neat.
Yeah, the frescoes on the wall were still original, which was really cool. And just seeing, they call Herod the Great Engineer because he did so many incredible engineering feats, so that was really cool.
See some of the high rises of the new city, and now, wow, there's Temple Mount.
This was a big moment for everyone. He kind of told us as we were coming through this tunnel that we were about to see our first look at the old city of Jerusalem, and it was a special moment. this was our third or fourth hotel, and I went out and explored the city. It was really, really cold.
It was really cold. I was not expecting the desert to be so cold. This was our coldest days for sure. It was a really interesting mix of cultures. Lots of, very Orthodox Jews, lots of Christians, and lots of Muslims, which is not something you see super often.
Now we're walking through Jaffa Gate, I believe, to enter the Temple Mount, which we were told we weren't going to visit for obvious reasons.
Ramadan.
And he, that morning, ended up saying, we're going, so take all your Christian symbology off. Hide your crosses, your bracelets, all of it. Don't touch your spouse, don't hold hands, don't hug. A lot of security entering the Temple Mount. And, of course, we've all read the news in the last couple days. A few days after we left, there was just violence all over the place up here. But we were able to see it, and Matt gave us a lesson.
Back in Genesis, Abraham was told to bring Isaac the sacrificing. And you're going to go by what we call the Dome of the Rock. Under that you can't get in there. I was in there 40-something years ago, where the sacrifice was made for all of humankind there on the other end of this rock. And here endeth the lesson.
So this is us exploring the Temple Mount, which would have been the holiest of holies back when the Jews had a temple here, specifically in the Second Temple period with King Solomon. This is the Dome of the Rock. So this is one of the most disputed places, which again, we had to go through a lot of security, and we were there during Ramadan, so there was a lot of Muslim worshipers up there as well. But that's where it's believed that Abraham was asked to sacrifice Isaac there on the Temple Mount.
And then it was quickly on to the Western Wall. Everything was just being thrown at us so fast. Everything was so crowded, and we were trying to keep up with the group. And this is our first look at the Western Wall, which to me felt like a very holy place. I mean, I think it's just everybody had such respect for it. I wrote some prayers.
This is the last standing wall from the original temple, and it's split into men on one side, women on the other side. So we kind of got separated for the most part on this day because McKinnon was kind of hanging with the men where women were not allowed, and then the women kind of went over to the women's side, which the men's side was a lot nicer, but whatever. And then we also went in and did a virtual reality experience, which was super cool, which actually took you through a rendition of what and where you're standing, what it would have looked like during Jesus's time and during the Second Temple period, which was really neat.
We're about to see that. And what you were just looking at was the old, on the men's side only, they have a worship center underground for the Jews. Come in, they recite their prayers, and Mac explains what we saw.
Yeah, let every bone in your body, yes. And so they again, that's a ritual. They're letting all of their body be involved in it. Everything but the heart.
We also only do bat mitzvahs on certain days, and we just happened to be there on the days that they were doing the bat mitzvahs.
Now this is the Temple Institute. This was the virtual reality Ann was talking about. It gives you an idea of what the temple would have looked like. And that was really neat. But also the Temple Institute's in charge of having rebuilt
the next temple.
Every item necessary to begin sacrificing again in the third temple. They actually had a $3.5 million solid gold menorah, according to biblical standards, that they've already built and raised money for, so that it's ready when the third temple gets rebuilt for them to start sacrificing again. Of course, that comes before the end times in Scripture. And now we're at the southern steps.
With one another. And herein is the lesson.
Amen. Amen. It's an interesting dichotomy.
This is an interesting spot. This is where Mac believes Jesus had the Last Supper with the disciples, actually, in contrast to the upper room, which is mostly accepted. But the southern steps, that was a neat place because we know Jesus walked on those steps. And as Mac was giving the lesson, you could hear the Arab prayer, which is just, we both felt was so fascinating, the contrast between the two.
Yeah, so the next day we got up and we went to the Museum of Israel, or the Israeli Museum, which first they have this kind of reconstruction of Jerusalem and what they thought it would have looked like. But then, of course, we moved into the Shrine of the Books, which was the Dead Sea Scrolls. But they didn't let us take pictures in there because it's harmful, but that was really cool getting to see that. And then, of course, we moved through the actual museum. I would have loved to take more time there. They kind of rushed us in and rushed us out, but me and McKinnon, kind of did our own thing, kind of wandered off and got to see some more things from before Jesus and after.
Look at the preserved areas of Herod's palace here, and we're about to see where this is the sarcophagus of the Caiaphas' son. This is where Caiaphas, and that's where they found his crucified skeleton, and then the original stone of Pilate. This was really cool original stuff here. This was a heel bone they found with a nail through it, representing somebody who'd been crucified. I just thought it was so wild.
Yeah, it was really cool. And also, like, the Teldan stela that we had seen, the replica of, and, bless you, and the Pontus Pilus from Caesarea Maritima, both of those were in the museum as well.
And then we were off to Shepherd's Valley. This was the restaurant in Palestinian territory in Bethlehem. We ate this before we went and saw...
French fries!
Yeah. It's called the Tent Restaurant. They try to recreate how the Bedouins would have eaten. And this is Shepherd's Valley. This was an example of where they would raise the sheep for sacrifice. Max says hundreds of thousands of sheep in an hour of period. I'll let you listen to him.
Sacrifice somewhere around 100,000, 200,000 lambs.
Wow.
And maybe a day for a few days. It was because that was the only time of year that laymen could go up and slay the lamb themselves.
All right.
So then we were off to Herodian, which was that kind of fake volcano mountain. He didn't find a hill large enough, so he just had one built. But this is Herod's prize. Herodian was his palace. This is also where he was buried as well. And before he was buried, he actually said, if I can't enjoy it, no one else can, so go in and destroy it. So a lot of it was destroyed. Then the Jews, again, in the rebellion, came and used some of the destroyed materials to kind of hide out from the Romans in. But this is where he was buried.
Oldest dome ever built, and they were telling us that the Romans get credit for it or something, but in actuality it was the Canaanites that because of the gate at Abraham's gate that they built the first dome. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Now this is right outside of Bethlehem, right up on that man-made mountain. And his mausoleum, the guy that actually searched for Herod's tomb, it was kind of his life's goal to find it. He finally found it, and then he actually fell next to it and died. So
fell into the tomb after he looked at it his whole life, found it, and then died. This was awesome. This was a video production recreating the, I guess, frescoes is what they call it.
So this was one of Herod's theater rooms, and so what you see on the wall is actually original frescoes, and then they actually had these projectors kind of retracing what it would have looked like, and also taking you through kind of the whole timeline of it being built, Herod living in it, and then of course Herod having it destroyed once he was killed, or once he died, I guess.
I have come back to Herodium, to this theater, again in the service of the king.
Oh,
yeah.
McKinnon was frustrated with the group. He said, we're going to have to split and do our own thing tonight. And so
we got a taxi over to a movie theater.
Oh, yeah.
And we had McDonald's, and it was Shabbat, so none of the Jews were out, so we actually got a meat and cheeseburger, which was great. And the movie theater was awesome.
Real clean.
It was really awesome.
Now, this was the Mount of Olives, and this is our final day, a special moment here. A lot of security, not sure what happened up there, but seemed to be unusual amount of security. But anyway, he gave a lesson, and we got to see the old city from where Jesus stood.
What's really cool to me was just knowing that when Jesus does come back, he's going to come back right there on that spot in the Mount of Olives, and he will actually walk down the hill and into the gate, which actually was sealed up by the Muslims. But he'll walk through that gate and into the city and into the temple that we are supposed to eventually rebuild.
This road that you and I walked right here, same place. We'll have that memory forever.
Yeah, this road is also known as the Palm Sunday Road because this is where it's believed that Jesus actually rode the donkey into the city down this road. And you can see lots of Jews are buried here with their feet facing the old city because they believe when Jesus comes back, they will be the first ones that he resurrects and they will rise and walk into the city with him.
The special Garden of Gethsemane here where Jesus wept before he went into the city for the final time. It's very beautiful. They keep it very nice and well maintained, and Matt gave a great lesson. That was special.
Yeah, and all the olive trees as well, all the olive wood. There's olive trees everywhere, but especially in the Garden of Gethsemane.
And they had some ancient trees next door at this church here that you're looking at that they date to, I don't know, in the first few centuries. And then we were off into the old city. We were walking the Via Dolorosa. We went to the Pool of Bethesda, which is where Jesus heals the paralyzed man sitting by the pool. This was a beautiful sight.
Yeah, it's a French church that actually sits on the site. The Pool of Bethesda, they use these pools to bathe themselves and cleanse themselves before they went into the temple. And it was known that if you sit down there, if the water, rumbled, then angels were healing you. And so Jesus came and healed the men, or a man that was sitting there waiting for the angels to come and heal him.
We got to sing in this beautiful church. And now we're back on the Via Dolorosa, and we went underground to some of the only preserved sites that we know Jesus walked on. This was the level of their streets that's been built on top of 2 or 3 times, and this was the actual streets that he would have walked underground there. There was a King's game that you saw there just a minute ago, a little rectangle, and it's where Roman soldiers inscribed the crown of thorns on the game. This is where Jesus would have touched the wall as he was bearing the cross through the city. He got tired and he put his hand against the wall, and that's what you just saw there.
I believe this is in the Christian quarter. The old city is broken into kind of 4 parts: Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and Armenian.
This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where it's most accepted that Jesus was laid. His body was on this stone laid to be prepared
for burial.
And people bring their items and have them blessed here on the same spot that Jesus laid. And inside this church, they've also commemorated the spot of the crucifixion, Golgotha, upstairs, the site where Mary stood and watched him be crucified. This is the most holy spot in all of Jerusalem.
They also have remnants of where they believe his tomb would have been as well. And you can queue up and line up to go in and see kind of where they think that his body was laid in the tomb.
That's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, that's the tomb. It would have taken us probably hours to get through the queue, though, so we didn't go in.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. For I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Hallelujah.
This is the menorah that the Temple Institute has rebuilt and are prepared to put inside the new temple when It's rebuilt. This is the Joppa Gate. This was previously the border between Jordan and Israel, and you can see in the side were bullet holes where they would shoot at each other. And then we're off to the Garden Tomb. This was our final spot of the day, I think. No, we went anywhere. We went after, but we'll see that in a minute. But this is Skull Hill. It's the second site where they believe he may have been crucified, just because the mountain has a face of a skull in the side. That Scripture obviously says they took him to the place of the skull.
But they also say, too, that crucifixion probably didn't happen on the hill. It probably happened in front of or beside it where there were major roads. So now it's a bus parking lot, but it could have been where he was crucified.
And this was inside the tomb. And we just wanted to get a little video to remember where he may have risen.
What I think was so cool about the Garden Tomb was not necessarily, is this the spot, is this not the spot? But I just liked seeing how it would have looked. You know, now when you go to these sites, there's all of these giant Catholic churches and shrines and all of that. But it was really cool to get to see how it maybe would have looked.
We took communion and sang in the garden. And our final visit, if you're not tired yet, is the Valley of Elah, which is where the battle took place between David and Goliath, which was very cool. We know that that red roof up there is where the Philistines camped, and David was to the left, and this is where it happened.
We also picked up some stones there as well for our family members.
And then we had a farewell dinner, and Pastor Mac and Debbie thanked everyone.
Sites and been to these things now about 24 times. But I love to see it through the eyes of folks who've never been here. So thank you for coming on vacation with us and for joining us here.
Our main guide is the guy on the right. His name was Edo. He's who led us around most of the week.
And overall, it was a transformative trip, you know, now that we're back and I'm not so exhausted.
we did. I was sick on the trip. McKinnon is now sick after the trip, so.
But looking back, it's more meaningful reflection as it was going through at a theme park pace there for a little while. But I'm happy that we were able to see it all and not have to miss anything. So kind of justifies the pace that we took.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a wonderful trip.
And on the day you call me in to heaven's sweet embrace, I see your scars, your open arms, and the beauty of your face. Through tears of joy I'll lift my voice in everlasting praise. Hallelujah, Christ is risen from the grave.